everybody for coming here today.
Reset the password.
I think there is a management, but we've not.
Sorry, you Dr. Blair.
So, I'm just gonna turn it on mirror.
There's an admin
So what I'm
going. There's That's definitely on.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, thank you so much. It's pretty packed, so I'm gonna get out of here, but thanks
Yeah.
everybody for coming and seeing Dr. Gwen, so y'all have a good one. Come see us tomorrow. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Hello, welcome. So I was gonna make this more of a shared talk. A few people brought devices. I wasn't really sure the nature of this was gonna be, if everyone's gonna have a device and this was gonna be talking. So I don't have a whole lot of slides prepared, but what I wanted to do was go through, talk a little bit about what these tools are, how they relate to Active Directory, and sort of give you an insight as to how we approach Active Directory analysis as attackers. And then let's go through a little bit of a demo based on some sample data set. And talk about y'all coming in, come on in.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you. I was just where to start.
And then talk a little bit about the process of getting these tools installed, one of which is really easy, the other one not so much. But that's the idea. So first off, let me ask y'all a question. Let me start from the very beginning. I love questions. I love interacting. If you have a question about anything, or if you have an observation about what I'm saying, I would love for you to raise your hand or stand up on the table and sound by barbaric y'all. Anything is cool for me. So, all right. So, does that still work? Yes, it does. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about Active Directory specifically, and about some tools that we can use to do analysis in Active Directory. Let me just get a show of hands of people who have heard of Bloodhound before. 1, 2, okay, half the room. All right, well, not half, but a good quarter. How many of y'all have heard of Ping Castle? The same people, okay. How many of y'all are red teamers? Okay, all right. You guys are probably not going to get as much out of this as everyone else, but I more than welcome you if you have better knowledge of this subject material than I do. If you have any experience using these tools that I don't bring up that you think is relevant, please stop me and bring it up. All right, so what's all this about? First off, let me give you the bona fides. Who is this guy? Why should I listen to him? I ask myself that question all the time. I am the director of cybersecurity at Next Step Innovation. It's a Mississippi-based company with ownership that lives in Arkansas. So we sort of split our time between the two states. We work with a number of different organizations, everything from K-12 all the way up to state agencies in the state of Mississippi and Arkansas, as well as SEC schools at the higher ed level. So we've done a lot of work with a lot of different places, and as the director of cybersecurity, I am essentially dealing with the process of doing a constant stream of security audits. So my exposure to the security world is pretty much entirely from the red team perspective. So I'm always going into environments, seeing what I can get into, trying to compromise it, always looking at trying to get to domain admin. So that's what I do. Previously to this, I was the chair of computer science at a tiny little school in Jackson called Belhaven University. I was asked to restart the computer science program, and I was basically the sole professor for about 4 years. But I was able to hand the reins off to somebody else, and they're doing a wonderful job. So I got to jump headfirst into private sector again. Prior to that, I was at Lincoln Laboratory up in Lexington, Massachusetts, where I primarily did blue team research. So we were the cyber operations group, which is the group that does research for the warfighters, the hands-on keyboard. Okay, so most of my work was in sort of big data. I got hired as a visualization guy, but to do visualization, you have to have the data, and if the data is sitting off everywhere, you have to figure out how to pipe it all into one place, store it in one particular architecture, and then Robert's your mother's brother, now you're doing big data. So that's what I did. So that's sort of my scope. I have an OSCP. I got it many a year ago. It's pretty much irrelevant at this point. I probably should go back and get it again because I got it in 2016. So very, very little what I learned back then. I won't say little, but not a whole lot. So that's me. So I'll start with this quote. All red teamers have heard this quote till they're sick of it, or at least they've heard it in the context of cybersecurity, but I'll talk about it because this is, to me, the whole point behind this talk. And it's something that people don't quite get right. A lot of people think it's more magical than it actually is. But this was, as far as I know, this is from John Lambert, who was associated with Microsoft Research and Microsoft Security Group. And it's this, he says, defenders think in lists and attackers think in graphs. And as long as this is true, the attackers will always win. Well, I have a whole set of slides that I associate with this where I go into some of the details of it, but I can just give you the précis of what he's trying to say. It's that basically defenders have to be right all the time and attackers only have to be right once. And the key to being a good attacker is finding the right thing to attack. And that's what thinking in graphs means. That's all it means. All security. Physical or anything else. That's a fair point. That's pretty much security as a whole, is that the hardest part of being a blue team defender, it's especially hard when you're like 90% of blue team defenders, you're wearing multiple hats. Not only are you blue team, you're also ops. You're doing both. And it's that when you're doing ops, you think in lists. You have to think in lists because those lists are those things help you delegate, right? Those things help you manage resources of which you have little, right? And so when you're thinking like that, you have to think in lists because you have to get your job done. Because at the core of it, nobody wants security. They fear insecurity. And so it's very difficult to convince anybody to pay for security because as far as they're concerned, it's like a boat without the fun. It's just a black hole that you dump money into and it doesn't give you anything good, right? Unfortunately, that's the way it's been thought of in the past, and hopefully, and I think we're changing going into the future, it's less viewed that way. But that said, the attacker's job when they get into an environment, and that's our primary job, right? We always start with the sort of standard, scan all the things, try to find anything that's vulnerable, right? But the first thing that we do is we start rank ordering the things to go after that we think are going to get us the most bang for our buck, especially as a pen tester, right? A penetration tester, that's pretty much all we ever do, aside from just the auditing portion. The penetration tester you can think of it as threat actor emulation at an extremely compressed time scale, right? So you cannot have this sort of TTPs that would leave you undetected if you're gonna get done in 40 hours. So you just throw the sink at stuff and you're loud as all get out, right? But even being as loud as we are, we have a finite amount of time to get our job done, so we're always looking for the fastest win possible.
And
right.
Scope of the claim.
That's very, very, very true. So penetration tests, by definition, are scoped as opposed to a red team. If you're actually doing a full-on red team where you got FedEx hats and drop thumb drives and all that good stuff.
The fun stuff.
The fun stuff. It is a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun, but most people can't afford it. Right, if you're doing a red team, you're a massive power company, you're a Fortune 50, you're somebody like that, you're banking, that's who's getting a red team, right? Think the movie Sneakers. But most people can't afford that. They have to do a penetration test, and a penetration test has to be scoped. It has a very, very narrow scope in the sense that you are not testing every possible way into this organization, including social engineering. You're leaving that alone. You're not doing that unless they ask for it. So instead, we as a company, what we do is we do internal network penetration testing. We don't start with anything but layer 3. So we have an IP address and a presence on the network. And then from that, we see where we can get. And thanks to things like multicast name resolution, that's pretty much all we need in 90% of places, which we're trying desperately to change. We keep reporting and telling people this is how we got in, and it's getting better. People are starting to make SMB signing required. So let me just ask y'all, this is not the point of the talk, but let me ask y'all, how many of y'all have SMB signing required on your server population? You're a good person. That means that nobody has it. Well, do you have it on your clients as well?
Working on it.
Okay, all right. Good for you, good for you.
We're working to get there.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Be that as it may, everybody in this room, I know I'm not talking about Active Directory, but I'm gonna brought it up, I'm gonna talk about it. Everyone needs to work on the problem of getting SMB signing required on all of your server population. You wanna know why?
Yes.
How many of y'all have heard of multicast name resolution? Seriously, hands up.
MDNS.
Okay. You know MDNS. Name 2 other protocols.
Yeah. Protocols?
Multicast resolution, name resolution protocols.
I don't know.
Okay. LLMNR,
Okay.
which is an old school one from Windows.
And most of the time it's on by default.
Yes, it is. And then there's NetBIOS, which not only is it on by default everywhere, it's very hard to shut down. LLMNR you can disable with the GPO. BIOS, I've heard more than one person whose opinion I trust say that you can get it disabled from the DHCP server, meaning that if the client listens to the DHCP, then you can disable it via the DHCP server. But that's not the 100% way. The only way to truly disable NetBIOS name resolution, the name service, is via a registry change, which means you're sending out a startup script of some sort, or scheduled task. Anyway, multicast name resolution is a way for me with nothing but layer 3 to not only get credentials, but get access to SMB anywhere I can see. If SMB signing is not required, not enabled, required. And your server population is where you need to spend your time making SMB signing be required. Why? How many of y'all know that I can pull plain text credentials off of servers from the remote registry over port 445 alone? There we go, my red teamers, they know this. They use this all the time. You need to be aware of that. Yes. Your servers, and it's not going to be clear which ones are going to have these stored in the registry or not, but your servers, if I can get a domain admin to authenticate via NTLM to me, which Garen, I promise you I can take that handshake, that NTLM authentication handshake, and relay it to anything where SMB signing is not required. Okay? And once I do that, now I have port 445. I have SMB. I don't have WMI exec, okay? But I do have SMB client, SMB exec, and I have the ability to dump the remote registry, on which, especially in the server population, on which it is non-zero probability that there will be at least one set of plain text credentials in the remote registry. Okay? So all that to say, this is what we mean. When we walk in and you put a RJ45 into the back of my laptop and I start doing my work, the first thing I'm doing is I'm listening for multicast name resolution. Who's spewing it? And every person that asks me a question, I give them an answer. I respond to them and I tell them, oh, that's me. That file server you're looking for, oh, that's me. And if you're looking for a file server, guess what's the very next thing you're going to send me? Credentials. You're going to send me an NTLM handshake immediately. And once I have that, I can either crack it because it's just a hash,
Or you just pass that.
or I pass the hash. I pass the handshake, and if SMB signing is not required, I get access with whatever privilege level you have. Okay? And determining who has privilege levels is part of this talk. okay? So we're gonna talk about it when we get to Bloodhound, all right? But that's the idea, is that that's how I can start with nothing but layer 3 and end up compromising a machine with nothing. Or at the very least, getting a set of credentials. So if you have a crap password, I'm cracking it, and now I have plain text. And what's the first thing that I'm gonna do? With those credentials, I'm going to immediately go to AD and start pulling data that any domain account has access to by necessity, right? I don't know, that's what Microsoft says they need. So that's the idea, and it's that thing that I'm doing. I'm thinking in terms of graphs. I'm not thinking about compromising everything. I'll get everything eventually, but I'm not doing everything now. I'm doing the weakest link first, and then you'll see how it just simply spirals out of control, and everything starts crumbling like a big waterfall of garbage. Okay? And so what we're wanting to do is we want to talk about, okay, what are the tools that we use? How do we think? That will help you to go into your environment and start looking at those. We're going to talk about 2 different tools. The first that we're going to spend the most time on is Bloodhound. The second one we're going to talk about is Pingcastle. All right? I personally don't have a lot of experience with Pingcastle, but I know a lot of people whose opinions I very much respect use it assiduously. They love it. All right? And I do know that in terms of these 2 technologies, the one that is ready for prime time more for y'all is Pingcastle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to point you to it, show you a little bit what it does, and then show you how to download it and run it. It's really straightforward. Bloodhound, however, is the fiddly thing that we do use, and it was one of the first out there, and I'm pretty sure Pingcastle was inspired by Bloodhound. I could be wrong about that.
Bloodhound was written by some guys primarily into PowerShell, kind of as a response to the Metasploit PowerShell module that was come out to kind of help you. Do you use Metasploit at all in kind of some of those pen tests to just kind of as one of those pen testing tools, or is Metasploit kind of fallen to the wayside?
No, we use Metasploit all the time because we're lazy. I mean, if you don't have EDR, I'm using Metasploit, right? Which is what we normally get. And another thing, you need EDR on all your endpoints, and you definitely need some sort of EDR something on your servers. But that said, no, we use that Metasploit all the time.
Okay.
But to be honest, so many of the things that we do use that are, that we get the most success, Petit Patam, targeted Kerberos, all of those things had Metasploit modules, but we cut our teeth on the original proof of concept tools, and that's what we use for the most part. But we could use Metasploit for all of it, because it's all built in, right? Even Responder, I think, there's a version of like Responder-like stuff going on in Metasploit. I've never used it. I'm just used to Responder. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So there's a lot of background here, and again, I love that. Please, more of these comments, questions, observations. All right. So first off, I'm pretty sure this is the QR to the documentation for Bloodhound, which will point you to everything else. I promise you, I'm not doing anything bad. Just to
That's what somebody who's doing something bad would say.
Eyes on you.
Take my phone.
Take my phone. All right.
Login on this QR.
Why is there what? Login. Oh yeah.
Why is it asking for my Google credit?
Yeah. Just put them in there. Cool.
I want
All right. So the sort of the idea here is the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Just kidding. 6 degrees of domain admin, meaning that this is specifically a way for you to analyze an environment. It was originally written by folks that were in the PowerShell space, and they wanted to analyze Active Directory as a graph, right? Graph analysis, just like the whole Kevin Bacon thing, 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Y'all already heard that, right? Yeah, heard that? Yep. So what you want to know is how many steps are required, what is required to get to domain admin if I wanted to do a privilege escalation path through the relationships enumerated in AD. All right, so it's used as very basic graph theory, and in some cases a little bit higher level graph theory to find privilege escalation routes, or potentially find privilege escalation routes in AD. Right. So it's, I don't know how deep down the rabbit hole they go, how much of graph algorithms they have built into it. I know they have like the shortest path and a number of different things like that, which we'll show in a second. But it is, its purpose is to analyze AD permission structure as a graph, right? Also supports Azure, although we haven't done a whole lot of work with Azure ourselves, but it's built in, it's part of it. Now, for attackers, for red team guys, it's an attack path, right? It is the first thing. As soon as I get a set of plain text credentials, I can pull all the data needed for Bloodhound. And they can be low privilege. Doesn't matter. If I get a machine accounts in T-hash, that's enough. I can pull everything for Bloodhound. Yeah, even a machine account. I have to have an NT hash or a plain text, but I have to, but a machine account is functionally a domain user.
But in our case, we have kids account.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, like if you separated out students into a separate forest, and like if you have a forested domain and you have a separate one and you have essentially unidirectional trust, then I don't know that it could go the other way. I'm not sure, I don't know, we actually haven't tested it.
No one has that in the state of Arkansas. Everyone is a single forest where your students and faculty and machines are all under the same forest.
Is that like a state law?
No,
Okay.
but it's what DIS has kind of supported and kind of shown, and a lot of
Why did they
districts.
say do that?
Path of least resistance, all of it.
Say again?
Yeah, path of least resistance. Is the
Oh.
easiest to do.
It's easier for them to help support.
Yeah, it's easier.
We're not Walmart over here going with the red forest.
Fair enough. And you know, and you're not alone. There are people that do that. I don't know how in the world you could possibly live and have students, one of the most high velocity, churny bits of data in the world, sitting in the same thing with another set of data that isn't, right?
That's our struggle.
Boy, wouldn't it be great if you had a separate domain for the students and you have different policies.
We need people to be able to log on the same devices, so they share devices between people.
Trust is for, and you can, anyway.
So practically speaking, yesterday I taught intro to PowerShell, and one of the things I brought up in that class was the fact that PowerShell is this amazing, wonderful tool. If you realize that anyone who has a AD account can query your AD. Right?
Yeah.
So the student account can query the AD and
Yes.
begin running something like Bloodhound to
Yes.
get your 6 degrees.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, well, I mean, if they are classified as a domain user, then yes, it's there. I mean, the whole point is that this is not supposed to be something that, this should not be part of your attack surface. It really shouldn't, and that's what this whole talk is about, is to go through, so to know what is in AD is supposed to be an open secret. It's supposed to be something that everyone should be able to know. It's a zero trust thing, I think from Microsoft's perspective. And if AD is maintained correctly, it doesn't matter. Anyone could know it. So if I want to know the shortest path to domain admin, it's the domain admins. That's a correct graph, and there's nothing wrong with that, and anyone can know that. Now, the fact that they can query the entire user list, I don't know of any way, maybe you do, to lock this down from the basic domain user population. I don't know of a way to do that. Do you?
Not a good way that I've been able to find from anyone.
There's probably a hacky way somewhere, right? But I don't know that you can. So I suppose you could think of that as attack surface. In other words, for any user to be able to query who is in the domain admins group, you can see that as a problem. I can see how you would think that that's a problem, but I don't know of any way to do anything about it, right? And if you've got a good password policy and you've locked down all of the obvious problems, then you can constrain that to be nothing but a party trick, which is the whole goal. So attackers are looking for attack paths. Thank you for that, by the way. Attackers are looking for attack paths, and what the defenders can do, which is the whole point of me bringing it up here, is you can look for unintended relationships between things, unintended permissions, right? So, and sometimes it's just plain errors, which very often, almost always, when we find something on an audit, what we find is a surprise to who we show it to. We say, oh, I didn't even know that was even there, right? So I would like for y'all to be able to do this analysis, and see the same things that I'm seeing. All right, so let's break off from this. About 30 minutes down. How long does this go till? Two?
Right.
2 on the money, or?
45.
Okay, well, all right, Pencastle's pretty straightforward, so. All right, so let's start from here. This is a simulated bit of data called Moss Isley University. All right. So what we did is we went in and we grabbed some data and uploaded it into the system. It's essentially, oh really? Really, guys? Really? Yeah, that was what you said. All right, so it's buggy. It's free, so of course it is. But what you do is there is a tool called SharpHound that you would download. Now SharpHound is essentially a C# design executable that will allow you to pull all this data. All right, it's considered the best tool to use, but if, for example, if you're wanting to do this sort of work on a Linux box, you can either use SharpHound if you have Mono and such installed, or you can use, there's a Python version that uses Impact to do the same thing. So you pull this data down, comes to you in the form of JSON. Well, that's what the Python tool output is, JSON, and then you import it into here. And this Bloodhound is technically just a GUI. It's just a graphical user interface that overlays on top of Neo4j. Neo4j is a well-maintained, very long player in the graph database space, right? And frankly, the hardest part of this install. So getting Neo4j working on Windows, for example, is a real pain. It's really easy on Linux, but it's a pain on Windows. But, what was that?
I said it's nice to have Linux in a VM.
Yes, doing this from a Linux VM, and no, you don't have to have Kali. We don't use Kali. I hate Kali. I'm so sick of Kali. Kali breaks. I use Fedora. It's just happy. So, but if you use Ubuntu, that's fine too. Just don't use Kali. Please, offset guides, don't kill me. But you import it into the system and it dumps it into a graph database, and then it puts a visualization layer on top of that. And that's what Bloodhound does. So once we've imported all of this stuff, now we have the ability to go through and ask some questions. So it's a little hard to see. I may be able to make this. Do I have the ability to change? No, I don't. How horrible is it in the back?
How horrible is what?
Sorry, the ability to see what's on the screen. Is it okay? So
Click it on the screen.
Oh, there's
We'll just take your word for it.
There's a couple of dots.
There's some dots. There's some dots and stuff. You know, there's text. Anybody know how to make the font bigger on this thing? The normal Electron Control Plus doesn't work. Yeah, I can try the whole pinching thing. I mean, the pinching action is like, it doesn't make them any larger, it doesn't make the text any larger. It just goes
Yeah.
You'd have to
up the scale on DPI on your whole. Yeah.
well, I'm on Linux, so
Yeah, don't.
yeah.
Isn't that the start button?
Yeah, we'll make it.
Start button.
use those
Start button. I don't even have, like, I really wish I had a taskbar, but I don't want to install another package to have a taskbar, so whatever.
Control alt up and down, or page up and page down for cycling resolutions.
What?
Used to be able to cycle resolutions in Linux by it was like control alt, page up, page down, something like that. But I'm not saying do it, I'm saying.
I'm not gonna do that. All right, so instead, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna Vanna White this, and I'm gonna actually point at things and tell you what it says, okay? The folks in the front can probably see, but the folks in the back, not a chance. All right, so the first thing that we do, once we download this and run it, so for my red teamers, what's the first thing you click? Domain admin, right? They're at the bottom. Oddly enough, it's the very last thing, but it's the first thing you click, right? Because what I want to know is, okay, is there an easy win button here, right? Because sometimes there is. And so what is this doing? So let me show you something so So you click on that, it's gonna ask you, okay, which domain? With the idea that there may be more than one domain, like if you have a forested domain, there may be more than one domain that you want to select from. So this is just Moss Eisley University, takes a hot minute. All right, so there we go. These are the domain admins, all right? So we have the domain admins here and a bunch of randomized data throughout here. So these are the actual user accounts, and here is the enterprise admin. So I have all of the standard Windows groups have standard names. I didn't randomize those, all the other ones are randomized. But so we have these, and then we have another, the administrators, which contains 3 other groups.
Which is part of that.
I'm sorry?
It's a nested group.
Yes, it is a nested group. That is correct. So this is nested within this one,
Okay.
and this is nested within that one.
Okay.
And of course, it's important to understand that this is not a tree. It's a graph. Now, it's a directed graph, but it's still a graph. So this could be a member of that, and it could be a member of something else, right? So, but keeping in mind, it's demonstrating here what is the tree, because it's trying to find the shortest path. So it basically parses it down to a tree. It's not looking for cycles. All right, so this is the shortest thing, and this is fine. This is sort of what I meant earlier of, you know, how do I get to the domain admin group? Well, you're a domain admin. The only catch may be this. Now, in this case, now you'll notice that these have randomized names. That's because they're user groups, right? They're essentially groups that are ad hoc. Are these intended to be part of the administrators group? I don't know. You would, probably not. But if they are intended, then, you know, everything's fine.
That's how you accidentally end up with a custodian that has domain.
He's not wrong. So we start from there, and so let me see if I can't.
Working on somebody else's stuff.
Why is this part of this group?
So what's actually going on here? Just to explain it, let me block. All right, this is what's actually going on. This is the Cypher query language. Now, you in the back, can you see this? Okay, good. All right, this is the Cypher query language. It looks like line noise. It's actually not. It's actually not that bad. It's very close to SQL. Almost everybody in here can do SQL. It's very close to SQL by intention. But the idea is that all of your queries are queries on a graph about graphy types of stuff. And so what this is saying is that I want you to search through every node in this graph and find the shortest path of that node to any group that has the name domain admins. So it's the shortest path throughout the entire graph, as long as the edges have these names. And so if you know anything about Windows permission structure, these will look roughly familiar to you, right? So we have things like generic all, generic right, owns, right tackle.
Is the pipe an or statement?
Yeah, yes, that's a good question. He's saying, is this a pipe or? Yes, it is an or. Okay. Right, so the pipe is saying this or that or that. There's also an and, if you wanted to say that, but
this is all or.
That doesn't make any sense, right? Like the edge can only be one type. Got it. Right. So that said, yes, it's as long as any edge has one of these types, which means that you can find a sprawling shortest path from a janitor all the way to domain admin. Right, it's entirely possible. Right, and that's the power. This is the first thing that we run, because this is basically like a moonshot. Okay, I mean, are we going to shoot the moon and get us a win button, find the janitor, get his stuff, and then go? Right, but there are other things that you can do. Another important query would be, let's start with here. Find dangerous privileges for local user groups. Now, this is going to come back with nothing. Now, if you install this, the first thing that you want to do is you want to turn on query debug mode. Why? Because down here at the bottom, whenever you click on one of these, you're going to get the query. And so what we're going to do is we're going to change this. All right? We're going to come down and make a slight edit. I'm going to say I don't really care about whether or not this is a group, although yes I will. I'm going to say this is a user. I want to find any users that have these to a computer, and I don't really need this condition here. So the m.object_id has to do with something that is sensitive. So if we run that, oh boy, here we go. So I'm looking for users that have this relationship. So again, I apologize, it's hard to see, but here we have a user that has, I believe that's generic all on another user. Here we have a user account that owns 2 separate computers, right? Here we have one user that has, I wonder what that is. That's a lot of things. That is a lot of things that have been wrapped up in there. So let's see if we can. Whoop. How do I do that? There we go. Expand. Oh my.
So I'm guessing that's bad.
This is bad. The primary badness behind it. Now, for one, this is a user account that has a randomized key, so it's not a built-in user. So that's the first problem. The second problem is that this is a user account that has an ownership permission or an admin to directly to a computer. That is nearly always a terrible idea. Why? Because if you have a user with a privilege over a device, especially, and if it's a high-level privilege, it's easy to forget it. It will sit there like a bunion. Well, not even a bunion, that's a bad idea. It'll sit there like a freckle that you should have had checked out and turns into, and it's bad. So you generally always want all high-level privileges to be group delegated, right? And this is a way for us to find that. Now let's look for something that's even simpler. Let's just look for where the user has admin to a computer. Okay. Not good. Why is this not good? Think like an attacker, right?
They didn't have access to all the hashes that are on those computers, but other users logged in.
There we go. Think like an attacker, especially when it comes to any of these things here. If I want these computers, do I hack all these computers? No, I go after him. And you need to be aware that this person exists, and you better have a good excuse for it too. Otherwise, we're gonna rank you up. All right, but even this archipelago of nastiness sitting around the outside, okay, these are bad as well. Why? Because any one of these computers could have a shared admin hash on it. SID 500. Remember your local admin. Okay? If all of these computers and a portion of these have the same admin SID 500, once I pop one of these, I get that, and then I go everywhere. That's how an attacker thinks. We say, we get this one thing, extract as much as you can from that one thing, then stop, wait, listen, figure out what's here. Of what I just got, what will give me the most stuff? Well, the first thing I'm gonna try is the admin hash. Then I'm gonna try all the other local accounts. Maybe they have admin elsewhere as well. Then if I was able to dump the entirety of Secrets Dump, so Secrets Dump is a tool that we use to dump the remote registry. One of the things that's in that is that we know how many and which users and when they logged in with their domain accounts. Now we also have the DCC2 hashes, which are very difficult to crack, but if your password is garbage, we'll crack that too. Be that as it may, we're gonna look and see who's logged into it. Maybe one of those domain accounts is also an admin somewhere else, right? So we're gonna extract as much information as we can from the thing and then start attacking again. And that's how we work. We get a little bit, then we get a little bit more, then we get a little bit more, then we get everything.
Privilege escalation.
Was that?
Privilege escalation.
Privilege escalation is the idea. Yes, sir.
So obviously the cracking of that local admin, a lot of people tend to hard code the local admin as a single username and password and their SCC and taskin and stuff because that's what they were showed 10 years ago and that's what they're doing. If a district has moved over to something like LAPS, does that help at least mitigate some of
Oh,
this for
yes,
you.
please use laps, please use laps. Isn't there somebody giving a laps talk?
Yeah.
Go to that talk. If you don't have laps in your mouth, go to that talk. You'll be my best friend forever. Because this is the dumbest, this is the oldest play in the book, Pass the Hash. It is the oldest play in the book, and it's still impossible. But the only way to get rid of Pass the Hash is to use Kerberos. And then you have Kerberos. But baby steps. Baby steps. But that's the idea. Is that you have to get rid of the NTLM. The only way to remove Pass the Hash is to remove NTLM, because ultimately it all boils down to the way that the hash works is that you have plain text then MD4. And you really only need the MD4 little endian, blah, blah, blah. But the UTF-16 little endian of MD4 of that. That's what you need. That's why Pass the Hash works. Because that's all you need to produce the NTLM authentication handshake and to bypass the challenge. So, be that as it may, you have to get rid of NTLM. So yes, if you use laps, then at the very least, now that doesn't fix the other local users, but it does fix the local administrator, SID 500, meaning, or how many people have heard of it, of laps? Okay, good. For those of you who haven't heard of it, the idea behind laps is that all of the local administrator accounts have highly secure 32 plus character, I don't know how many characters is in it, I've forgotten. It's like 32 plus characters of random noise for all of the local administrator accounts, and all that information is stored in Active Directory, right? And it's regularly changed, right? Assuming everything goes to plan, and you haven't got Windows 11 versus Windows 10 and blah, 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 blah. But it is what it is. So I have not gotten to anything that I wanted to get to. Hopefully y'all were able to get something out of this. Question, yes.
Oh, well, just, have you seen a solution, if you do have one, let's just remove that local user altogether. Now, what are our options? Now, I know there are some clients that will create, and some MSPs have this,
Yes.
to create a local user quickly when you need it. However, that client also has a very high privilege as well.
Yes.
So which do you prefer, the labs, or to, let's remove that and maybe have some kind of client?
Well, okay, so
generate one that
so
would
if
be-
you have an MSP that's producing a local user ad hoc and is essentially implementing sudo a roundabout way, then we don't have a problem with that. The client having those privileges, it is what it is. Privilege is a necessity, right?
I'm too big.
But we do say that as long as when that user is created, or that when that user is created, it does not have a shared password with any other user in the environment, then it's, it's fine. It's as fine as fine can get. But as far as it goes with the SID 500, that has to have, that needs to have a different password on every single machine. So Pass the Hash, at least with the SID 500, goes away. All right. Anyway, I hope you guys, Ping Castle, we go to the Ping Castle slide. Ping Castle, there's a QR. Go ahead and grab that. If you just Google Ping Castle, we'll do the same thing there. But Ping Castle basically gives you a report, and it's really very good for remediation. So if you're going to start with anything, start with Ping Castle.
What kind of report?
I'll show you.
What is it?
We have a couple minutes.
Yeah, okay. All right.
How long was this?
We're supposed to be
Well,
at
15 minutes,
45,
right,
but the
between-
next class
Yeah, we can
starts
roll
at
over
2.
a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
So this is off of like generic health check of a generic account, but this is the sort of thing that gives you, it gives you an overall status, are you garbage or not? It goes into individual types, the individual ways in which you're garbage.
100% garbage.
100%. And then it starts talking about the risk model, which essentially breaks each of these categories down into individual indicators of compromise-ish sort of things. And this is going to tell you, so for example, if you read here, you have an object configuration. There are objects in AD that have a configuration that's particularly dangerous, right? This could be where you have one user that has inordinate privileges over another, and has the ability to do privilege escalation. You've got other things here. You've got delegation checks, ACLs, account takeover, all of these things will tell you what it's there, and then it gives you your overall maturity level, which is just another kick in the because it tells you how bad you are again. And then we have all the individual essentially IOCs that are there and the basis for which they found them.
It's a
Okay.
good way to shock the hell out of you, and then you go to your super and go,
Yes, it is a very, especially if it's covered in red and orange, you can go to them, and say, listen, I need prime money, and then we need to fix this, right? Because if an actor got in your environment and you look like this, you're dead. You're dead. You are dead. They will take you down within minutes.
It probably goes without saying, but some people have trouble with it. There's no shame in coming to somebody like you and saying, I need help.
Absolutely not.
Because
Well, that's,
you do this 24/7, where I'm
Right.
doing access control, Chromebooks, everything.
well, see, that's the thing, is that ultimately, I would disagree with you in that you know how to fix this better than I know how to find it. Right? I'm very good at finding it and exploiting it. I'm not nearly as good as you are at fixing it, but if you and I can put our heads together and do some purple teaming, where you got Mr. Red and Mr. Blue together, make purple. If we can do some purple teaming and talk and have a discussion afterwards, a long discussion, we can nail this thing down and you can figure out a pathway forward for fixing all of this, right? And that's our job. That's what red teamers do. We're here to help you secure your environment from an attacker's perspective, not just a vulnerability scanner. Okay? So, cool. Any other questions?
Are you doing any other sessions?
I'm giving a talk about vCISO services tomorrow where I give a possibly spicy opinion on the topic. But yes, I am doing a thing tomorrow. 3:30? 3, no.
Are you going to be here hanging out at the conference
Yeah.
rest of today and tomorrow for
Yeah.
us to come find and
Yeah, sure. Yeah, today and tomorrow.
sweet.
Yeah.
Can we just get you out there in the foyer?
All of your stuff so we can steal it from you.
We'll just.
All right, cool. If anybody has any questions, that's fine. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Familiar?